Other heroines get reincarnated and are busy becoming villains and crushing their enemies. They wear lavish clothes to seduce the crown prince and other handsome guys. But the heroine of this story? She's busy grinding monsters and farming for gold. Her plan to play dumb, fake sickness, and stay invisible was going perfectly, until the day she messed up. She activated a magic shield to save the entire royal palace. I told you I wanted to be a normal person, so why are you forcing me to be adored by everyone? The story begins. Who would have thought the one who was once cherished and held so dearly would now be thrown away like trash in a cold prison? No matter how hard she thought, Yulia couldn't understand. Technically, she was still the crown prince's most beloved. So how could these people dare to be so cruel? Randall just stood outside the bars, coldly witnessing everything. It was as if the tragedy before him had nothing to do with him. Yulia, barely breathing, tried to speak, to defend herself, to say she'd never done anything, but no one cared. Just then, the interrogator completely lost his patience. He roared at her to confess quickly because all the so-called evidence had already been fabricated. Yulia was trapped. With her last bit of strength, she reached out, desperate to grasp the final sliver of hope, but the man who once said he loved her didn't even bother to look back once. Randall. He walked away with decisive steps, his footsteps echoing down the hall, each sound like a death sentence. Yulia had been completely abandoned by this world. The past tenderness and present coldness were as distinct as two different worlds. Her family never came, her friends disappeared. She didn't even know how long she'd been locked in this place. Just as she was about to collapse, the cell door suddenly swung open. A masked guard spoke coldly, ordering her to get out immediately. Heavy shackles were locked onto her wrists. Yulia went on. She was brutally dragged by the guards towards the execution platform, each step leaving a trail of blood. The sentence echoed from the high platform across the square. They charged her with countless heinous crimes, saying she conspired to poison Crown Prince Randall and even attempted to overthrow the kingdom. According to the law, it should have only been death by stabbing, but to humiliate her, they decided to carry out a public execution before tens of thousands of eyes. The blade of the guillotine hung above her head. Yulia was pinned down on the execution device with no chance to turn things around. Meanwhile, Randall stood on the high platform, still looking like an indifferent bystander. Vera stood right next to him, hiding half her face behind a fan, revealing a cunning smile. The smile of a victor. It wasn't until the moment the sharp blade fell that Yulia fully understood. She realized she had been schemed against by that woman with no way out. She fixed her gaze one last time on Randall on the high platform, carrying all her grievances without being able to speak a word. With a loud thud, everything faded to black. She thought this was the end of her life. But a familiar voice suddenly echoed in her ears. Someone was calling her name. Yulia's eyes snapped open, and she was stunned to find herself tucked into a warm blanket. The maid, Ami, in front of her looked unbelievably young. What the hell was going on? Were the flashbacks before death still not over? Yulia looked down at her own small hands and finally realized the truth. She had been reborn with the memories of her past life and returned to the very moment it all began. Yulia quickly called out, Ami, quick. Get me a mirror. Ami jumped, thinking her lady was still delirious from sleep. But when the mirror was brought to her, Yulia was completely stunned. The chubby, round face in the mirror was clearly how she looked when she was a few years old. She vividly remembered lying on the execution platform, the cold guillotine blade falling. But now she had truly been reborn. She'd returned to a time before the series of tragedies began. However, before she could celebrate, the horrifying images of her past life flooded her mind. Randall's cold eyes and that woman's triumphant smile haunted her like a nightmare. Yulia couldn't take it anymore. She clutched her head and screamed in despair, Help me, someone save me. Ami was so scared she fumbled, trying to comfort her while rushing outside to call for her master. It seemed their young lady had lost her mind. Yulia covered her ears. The traumatic memories threatened to drown her like a tidal wave. She prayed. This was just a nightmare. Hearing the noise, her father rushed into the room, but Yulia's eyes were filled with hatred from being abandoned in her past life. She screamed hysterically, telling them all to get out. In her memory, when she was sent to the chopping block, none of these so-called family members had stood up to save her. The overwhelming rage and fear made her pass out again. When Yulia opened her eyes again, a kind old man was sitting by her bed. She spoke cautiously, "Dr. Baron." It seemed her outburst had alarmed quite a few people. But right now, who could she trust? Dr. Baron examined her thoroughly and found that the magic within Yulia was normal. But the child's condition was worse than a simple loss of magical control. The traumatic images of her past life coiled around Yulia like venomous snakes, making her feel like she was suffocating, wanting only to disappear from this world. Just as she was about to break down screaming, Dr. Baron acted quickly, using a technique to forcibly calm her chaotic mind. If he had been any later, just one more step, something terrible might have happened. It seems something terrible might have happened. As Yulia fell back asleep, Dr. Baron was also at a loss. The Duke and Duchess seemed to love their child dearly. There was absolutely no sign of abuse. So what horrible thing could a 3-year-old child have experienced? To show such an extremely despairing look in her eyes? He couldn't understand it. For a 3-year-old to cry to that extent was completely insane. It went against all common sense, unless her mind was under an immense pressure that ordinary people couldn't imagine. Where did that pressure come from? Dr. Baron pushed up his glasses. In all his years of practice, this was the first time he'd encountered something so strange. If only memories could be erased like a broken film. Yulia now lived in fear every day. Over time, even her own parents ran out of patience. Her father coldly threw out a sentence. "Since all you do is cause trouble, you're forbidden from leaving your room from now on." This feeling of being turned against by the whole world made her just want to disappear. Just as she was about to break, Dr. Baron pushed open the door. He looked at the child curled up in her blanket and spoke in a warm voice. Why does living feel so painful? In her eyes, everyone around her was an enemy. No one was sincere. If the doctor didn't want to help, she could only bury her secret deep inside. Baron saw through her defenses. His tone became even gentler. "Don't be afraid. If you speak up, you'll feel better. I promise I won't tell anyone." Looking at the old doctor before her, for the first time she was moved. She truly couldn't go on living like this. But the only person she could trust right now was her maid, Ami. Yulia sent everyone away, keeping only Ami by her side. She couldn't trust anyone right now except her maid Ami. She took a deep breath and slid a piece of paper towards the doctor. Because she knew that in her past life, in that tragic end, it was Ami who had protected her without hesitation, risking her own life. This next move would decide whether she could rewrite her destiny. Dr. Baron looked at the paper in his hand, completely stunned. It was a magic contract. As soon as he signed it, he absolutely could not reveal the upcoming conversation. He couldn't believe a 3-year-old could pull off such a high-level trick, but he still decided to listen to the truth. Yulia was silent for a long time before finally revealing the earth-shattering secret. In fact, she wasn't a child at all. In her previous life, at the age of 19, she had been sent to the guillotine. This was so absurd, anyone else would have thought she was crazy. But looking at Yulia's serious expression, Dr. Baron chose to believe her. Yulia clutched the corner of the blanket, her voice trembling slightly. "Doctor, I don't want to stay here anymore. At this rate, I'll definitely die." Just thinking about becoming the crown prince's fiancé again, Yulia felt a chill run down her spine. The tragic end of her past life was something she absolutely did not want to experience a second time. Seeing the broken child, Dr. Baron made a bold proposal. He could use magic to seal her memories, but if not done carefully, it could be even more painful when it resurfaced. The best way now was for her to leave the capital forever, but to do that, He needed to do something. He'd write a certificate stating that she had mental problems. Would she accept that terrible reputation? Yulia didn't hesitate. As long as she could escape this hellish place, she didn't care about her reputation, even if she was seen as a madwoman. To cooperate with the plan, Dr. Baron decided to use a technique called dream magic. It could forcibly suppress painful memories that make people want to die. Once this magic was activated, Yulia would fall into a deep sleep. And when she opened her eyes again, everything would be completely different. In reality, this type of magic was a huge gamble. If the patient was lost in the dream and didn't want to wake up, they could sleep forever. If the patient was lost in the dream and didn't want to wake up, they could sleep forever. The only hope was for the person beside her to continuously try to wake her up. Dr. Baron instructed Ami. Seriously, no matter how long you have to wait, you must keep talking to her. If you give up, she will truly die. Ami didn't flinch. She replied firmly, no matter what happens, I will stay by my lady's side. Yulia looked at the doctor and nodded. If everything is ready, let's begin. She couldn't wait any longer to leave this family. Finally, the day to cast the spell arrived. It was ironic. When her cold-hearted parents saw the diagnosis, not only were they not sad, but they seemed relieved to get rid of a huge burden, immediately agreeing to send her to a remote territory. Although she was seen as a burden by her own parents, Yulia felt more relieved than ever. As long as she could escape, anywhere would be fine. Dr. Baron confirmed one last time. Yulia nodded. To avoid suspicion, the doctor had already told the couple that the child would sleep until they arrived. Yulia held Ami's hand. For the journey ahead, she would have to rely on the person she trusted most. Ami suppressed her sorrow, vowing never to leave her lady's side. In that moment, the dream magic officially activated. A dazzling light instantly filled the room. Yulia just felt her eyelids grow heavy, and then she completely lost consciousness. Dr. Baron whispered a prayer, I wish you a safe awakening. When Yulia opened her eyes again, the scene had changed to a lush green meadow. This was the deepest part of the dream. Although her body was still that of a child, she knew she had to find a way to survive in this uncertain world. Although there were always loud noises in her ears, compared to her previous desperate situation, this place was truly a paradise. Yulia walked aimlessly on the meadow. But besides grass and sunlight, there was nothing else. She began to wonder what she was supposed to do here. Welcome to the dream world. This white cat, who called himself a guide, was unexpectedly a projection from the depths of her own mind. Before Yulia could react, the white cat immediately gave her a ridiculous task, asking her to defeat the monsters on this field. Yulia froze. She had no weapon, and her magic was only at a beginner's level. How was this possible? Who would have thought the docile white cat from before would suddenly reveal a fierce face? It coldly judged, if you can't do it, you'll just have to die. Crying won't help you in this dream. Looking at the blue slime creatures bouncing in front of her, Yulia finally breathed a sigh of relief. Weren't these the slimes mentioned in textbooks? Even a child could handle them. She tried to channel the magic in her body. Unexpectedly, in the dream, her magic became incredibly obedient. With just a light wave of her hand, these small creatures were completely destroyed. This feeling of control surprised her. It was even easier than in reality. The white cat beside her kept instigating, saying that these monsters were all pulled from her memories. Because she was normally so studious, her dream world was this rich. Yulia looked at the slimes scattered on the ground, a new doubt rising in her heart. If all these things came from her memories, where was this dream ultimately trying to take her? The white cat's next words made Yulia's smile vanish. It said, although there are no ancient dragons now, nameless and stronger monsters. Stronger monsters will rush in immediately. Before she could recover, a slime charged straight at her. The bone-deep pain was so real it made her scalp tingle. The white cat coldly threw out a warning, getting hurt in a dream is real pain. If you die here, you'll never wake up in the real world either. After saying that, the cat vanished, leaving Ilya alone in the wilderness. At that moment, several dark figures emerged from the tall grass. The difficulty was no longer just limited to slimes. Rabbits with sharp, single horns were staring at her. Yulia knew that if she were pierced by that horn, it would really be over. Just as Yulia was about to be overwhelmed, a gentle voice suddenly echoed in her ear. It continuously told her not to give up. This strangely warm current helped her regain her spirit. In this endless hunt, she began to fight back. She didn't know how long had passed in this dream, but Yulia realized her body was slowly growing up. From a helpless little girl at the beginning, she had now become a young woman with an incredibly determined gaze. The monsters appeared more and more frequently. Even orcs and skeleton soldiers showed up, but she was no longer afraid. Instead, she saw this as just a long training journey. The long sword in her hand was chipped and broken. She casually took the weapon from a skeleton soldier. If my sword is broken, then I'll just take one from the enemy. The current Ilya could skillfully seize her opponent's weapon. In this seemingly endless series of battles, she was so busy she forgot what pain felt like. In this dream without day or night, she faced countless life-or-death situations alone. Even a fire-breathing ancient dragon became a stepping stone for her to become stronger. Looking at her current self, she couldn't help but remember the weak little girl who could only be trampled on in the past. At that time, she could only watch helplessly as that woman framed her. Her hands and feet bound, trembling in despair. But those days were gone forever. Now, her current self had enough power to turn everything around. Just then, the gentle voice spoke again, telling Ilya, "You've truly become strong." This long dream trial was finally coming to an end. The cat that had run away. The white cat reappeared, acknowledging Ilya's efforts over the past period. It told her all the combat experience she learned here would not disappear after waking up. Now, she had the power to protect herself. Ilya smiled and said goodbye to it. With a flash of dazzling light, stairs appeared beneath her feet, leading back to the real world. That familiar voice was waiting by her bed for her to open her eyes. The first thing she saw was her familiar bedroom and her maid, Ami, who was waiting by her bed, almost going crazy with worry. Seeing Ilya wake up safely, Ami shouted with excitement. The nightmare was over, but Yulia's real comeback story had just begun. Thanks to her efforts, the future of this life had started to change course. Seeing Ami hugging her and sobbing, Yulia knew in her heart. She secretly made a resolution. This time, she would absolutely avoid that man, Crown Prince Randall. She would walk a path of her own, where no one could trample on her again. But what she didn't expect was that at the same time, in the distant royal palace, Randall was standing thoughtfully by the window. Despite his attendant's concern, the young crown prince seemed unusually calm, even muttering to himself, the plan finally succeeded. It seems escaping the gears of fate is much harder than Yulia imagined. Ami kept crying nonstop. Yulia had to switch roles and comfort her. Don't cry anymore. If you keep crying, your eyes will swell up like walnuts. Now, thank you for always being by my side. I'm fine now. Just then, Graham heard the noise and rushed in. Seeing his tense expression, it was clear he was scared out of his wits. It turned out he wasn't just the cook here, but also her bodyguard. It seemed Ami and he were quite close. Yulia politely greeted him. If she was starting over, she naturally had to get reacquainted with those around her. From now on, she would protect this house. Graham was stunned. She was clearly just a 6-year-old girl, yet the noble aura she exuded put an indescribable pressure on him. As a result, after sitting for less than 3 seconds, Yulia's stomach suddenly rumbled. The atmosphere became a bit awkward. She quickly ordered Graham to prepare some food. While eating, Yulia learned from Ami that she had been asleep for 3 whole years. She was now 6 years old. Although her mind had been constantly fighting, this body was very honest. The moment she tried to get out of bed and take a few steps, her legs turned to jelly and she collapsed onto the floor. To make matters worse, not only was her body completely weak, but even the magic inside her seemed abnormal. She realized the magic within her was several times stronger than before she fell asleep. Perhaps over the past 3 years, the magic had been circulating on its own in her body. However, stronger magic wasn't a bad thing. What troubled her most now was her next step. What should she do? Yulia asked if her parents knew the truth about her coma. Ami shook her head. For the past 3 years, she had been helping Yulia hide it from her family. What was more heartbreaking was that Ami sent a report every month. But her parents never sent a single letter back. It was clear that in their eyes, this daughter had absolutely no love or weight at all. Moreover, the family now had 2 younger brothers. Jonas and Alan had been born, just as they had before time was reversed. Now that the family had heirs, Yulia knew that with any heir, she could be completely discarded by this family at any moment. Yulia began to plan her future path. If she remained this weak and sick, let alone attending the academy, it would be hard to even find someone to marry her. But that suited her perfectly. As long as she could get rid of the engagement with Crown Prince Randall, even if she had to pretend to be sick and hide in the territory for the rest of her life or even renounce her noble status, it would be fine. But it was too early to think about these things. The most urgent matter was to get her body healthy again. So Ami wouldn't worry anymore. Yulia decided to start her recovery training immediately. At first, she couldn't even stand steadily. She could only grit her teeth and secretly use magic to buff herself, strengthening this weak body bit by bit. Heaven rewards the diligent. After a period of secret special training, she could finally run and jump like a normal child. When Yulia pushed open the heavy door, a completely different world would welcome her. The townspeople whispered that the eldest daughter of Count Osborne, who had been bedridden for years, was not only cured but was now more energetic than anyone. Hearing these rumors, Yulia felt incredibly refreshed. In her past life in the royal capital, she had to play the role of a proper lady every day. Now, she just wanted to let loose. Anyway, the family already had heirs, so it didn't matter if she returned to the capital or not. She even thought about giving up her noble status and becoming a free-spirited adventurer. No sooner said than done, she dragged Graham and Ami along, whining about wanting to go hunting in the forest. Although the 2 of them complained helplessly, they still obediently followed behind as her bodyguards. Just like that, Yulia spent 10 happy years in the territory. From the moment she woke up, her second life truly began. She tried everything she wanted to do. Now, she could clearly say that this life was not lived in vain. During her years in the territory, Yulia lived a vibrant life. The family had a new younger brother and a younger sister. As the eldest sister, she truly spoiled these 2 kids to the heavens. She thought she could live like this forever, but just half a year before the academy was set to open, an official document from the royal capital was sent directly to her. It was a mandatory order from the count's family for her to immediately set off and return. Among the nobility, entering the academy at 13 was an ironclad rule. Before, she could use her illness as an excuse to avoid it. Now that her body was healthy, she no longer had any reason to refuse. This meant she had to return to that world full of schemes and deceit. To make matters worse, the person she wanted to avoid the most, Crown Prince Randall, was also at the academy now. Yulia swore to herself, this time, she would have nothing to do with him. And at this time, in the depths of the royal palace, Randall was standing thoughtfully, looking out the window. Everyone around him was worried about his condition, but he just casually said, "I'm fine." The blonde man, before leaving, deliberately reminded him that the room would always be kept for Randall, even though he had recommended her to His Majesty. But the queen would surely not let it go and would sooner or later find a way to shove a fiancé on him. Randall heard him out, but had no reaction. Right now, he just wanted to clean up all the useless people around him. This wasn't just for himself, but also to protect that person who couldn't be revealed. Seeing his cold expression, the man finally took out a magic tool. He had made this himself, and its effectiveness was beyond question. He instructed Randall to always carry it with him this time. Absolutely do not take it off. Randall agreed in a low voice. He adjusted his clothes, exuding a cold aura that warned strangers to stay away. Yulia was about to leave for the capital, which meant Graham and Ami's jobs would end. She thought they would be sad, but who knew these two had already prepared a fallback plan. Graham said with a smile, "Young lady, let's go sell the spoils from our last monster hunt." It turned out that all this time, the three of them had formed a monster hunting party. The accumulated bounty was enough for them to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. Ami excitedly showed off. "Thanks to you, young lady, we're now people with savings." She had practiced countless times in her dream, but when it came to real combat, Yulia realized that magical beasts in the real world weren't so easy to deal with. Her sword swing missed completely. It seemed that real combat and the dream world were two completely different things. He reminded Yulia that she was growing up, so her sword had to change too. In the dream, she could pick up any weapon, but in the real world, physical strength was the hard truth. Only then did Yulia realize that to use the skills from her dream, this body simply couldn't handle the strain. After just a few swings, her arms and legs were already exhausted. Fortunately, she had Graham and Ami as training partners. After many hunts, she finally got the hang of real combat again. Ami smiled, saying, "After leaving here, we'll open an inn for adventurers in the capital." As soon as she suggested an inn, "We've already asked Dr. Barron to find a location." She wanted Yulia to rest assured that before she started school, she would always be by her side. Compared to her own plans, she would always be by her side. Livelihood, Ami was more worried about Yulia's future path. Yulia smiled to reassure her, "Don't worry, the current me is strong enough. Besides, if you open an inn in the capital, we can meet anytime we want." Although she felt a bit empty inside, as long as Ami could live happily, Yulia felt it was all worth it. She stuck her head out the window and called out, "Graham, Ami, thank you so much for everything." As the carriage disappeared into the distance, those days of adventure together finally settled into beautiful memories. After going in circles, Yulia finally arrived home. The butler had been waiting at the door for a long time. He announced that the master was in the study and requested the young lady to go there directly. Looking at the hallway, in her palm, which even surprised the butler, "The young lady has been away for so long but still remembers the way to the study." Yulia paused. That's right, how could these memories etched into her very being be so easily forgotten? She almost blew her cover. How could someone who left home at the age of 3 be so familiar with this place? Yulia quickly made an excuse to smooth things over. Only then did the butler's suspicion fade. The butler knocked on the heavy door of the room. A voice came from inside, "Come in." It was her father's voice. After 10 long years, hearing this voice again, Yulia had mixed feelings. Her father got straight to the point. "I called you back because of your enrollment. For convenience, you should move directly into the school's dormitory." It sounded like he was being thoughtful for his daughter, but Yulia knew better. He simply found her to be an eyesore of a burden. In that case, she didn't need to act out a play of a loving father and dutiful daughter. Yulia calmly replied, "Staying in the dormitory is not a problem, but I have one condition. I'm not going to that finishing school. I want to enroll in the magic department." In her past life, to be an exemplary crown princess, she had endured enough of those tedious etiquettes. In this life, she would absolutely not play the role of a proper lady anymore. Faced with his daughter's request, the father was clearly a bit surprised. He coldly asked back, "Why?" Yulia sneered. An uneducated person like me would only bring shame to the family if I married into another noble house. But if I become a mage, no one will say anything even if my personality is a bit eccentric. Besides, my magic now is not lacking. Hearing this, he tightened his grip on his cane, silent for a long time before speaking. I understand. He promised to hire a tutor for Yulia, but his voice was filled with disgust. He couldn't say it. But he thought Yulia couldn't even write a proper letter, a true disgrace to the family. Yulia didn't bother to argue, just politely bowed and turned to leave the study. She had long seen through this cold family affection. She thought she'd find peace at home, but the butler led her to a guest room. It seemed there was no longer a place for her in this house. Yulia looked at the unfamiliar room and felt calm. After all, after so many years apart, blood ties couldn't overcome the barrier of time. But it was fine. As long as she could become strong, it was the same anywhere. In her father's eyes, Yulia was probably no different from an illiterate. He thought she had been rolling around with commoners, so she always reeked of vulgarity. The butler came to knock on the door, announcing it was time for dinner. Yulia thought she'd have to eat in her room, but she had to attend the family meal. The atmosphere at the dining table was chillingly cold. The way her parents looked at her was like looking at a dangerous object, wishing they could stay 1,000 miles away. The suffocating feeling was unbearable. At that moment, her 4-year-old brother Jonas spoke up. He curiously asked what kind of backwater place the countryside was. Yulia patiently explained, the weather there is pleasant, and the people are very friendly. Jonas showed a look of contempt, thinking that godforsaken place must be incredibly boring. Yulia smiled and replied, how could it be? I was busy every day reclaiming land and farming with the people. It was a very fulfilling life. The moment the words left her mouth, Jonas jumped up. He covered his face and nose in disgust, as if Yulia was truly covered in dirt that couldn't be washed off. He shouted, how could you do commoner's work? Stay away from me. Don't spread that vulgar smell to me. Seeing her little brother's attitude, Yulia sneered internally. In this house, arrogance and prejudice were clearly hereditary. Faced with her brother's insults, Yulia elegantly put down her knife and fork. She slowly replied, an heir who looks down on his own people can never manage his territory well. This statement directly hit a nerve with Jonas. He jumped up and yelled, how dare you lecture me? My teacher said I'm a genius, while you don't even know how to write. Seeing the situation getting out of control, the father, who had been silent, finally spoke up. He told Jonas to sit down, reminding him that Yulia was his older sister. Any dissatisfaction should be directed at him. But immediately after, he turned to warn Yulia, you shut up too. Don't cause any more trouble here. Looking at the so-called family before her, Yulia found it all so ironic. In her memory, her younger brother was clearly very cute when he was little. Why had he become so detestable in this life? Was it because of their mother's hatred for the countryside or the nonsensical gossip of the noble ladies that had made this family so cold? No one said another word. This so-called reunion ended abruptly in dead silence. The next day, her father's promise was fulfilled on time. The mysterious tutor finally arrived. Who would have thought the mysterious tutor would arrive? This new tutor was none other than Giannino, the man who would later become the head archmage of the royal court. This time, Yulia couldn't sit still anymore. A figure of this caliber was sent to teach her. Just who is that Dr. Baron? Well, if the teacher was this powerful, Yulia didn't plan to play dumb anymore. She got straight to the point, asking to skip the basic courses and wanting to start learning magic right away. Giannino was stunned. The rumors outside said the eldest daughter of this house couldn't even write. Yet now she claimed to have mastered all the basics. Yulia quickly added, please, teacher. You must keep this a secret for me. After all, she still wanted to live a hidden life at the academy. The reason Yulia had to hide her ability was because she was too well aware of herself. Once discovered as a genius, she would surely be turned into a political pawn, offered up as a fiancé to Crown Prince Randall. Speaking of Randall, Yulia's thoughts drifted back to when she was 7 years old. Back then, nothing had been turned upside down yet. They met for the first time at a royalty party. The Randall of that time was truly the Prince Charming of every girl's dreams. But no one expected him to notice Yulia in the middle of the crowd. For her, he even deliberately kept his distance from all the other young ladies. In the end, the only one left by Randall's side was Yulia. He held out his hand in front of everyone, inviting her, asking if Yulia would be willing to be his fiancé. Hearing those words, the Yulia of that time was overjoyed, even making a fool of herself. Thinking back now, it was a memorable time. According to the script of her previous life, Randall should have already chosen his fiancée at this 7-year-old tea party. But in this life, he didn't choose anyone. Yulia always had a feeling, was she the only one who had been reborn with memories? She had asked her father and those around her, but they had no impression of her past life. It seemed the course of this life had completely derailed. Since the situation had changed, Yulia decided to deal with the problem at hand first. Giannino clearly didn't believe she was a genius. He threw down a stack of tests, declaring that if she got a perfect score, he would help her keep it a secret from her family. These basic exercises were, for Yulia, as easy as flipping her hand. She wrote swiftly, finishing the test in a flash. Giannino initially expected to see a joke, but when he took the test paper, he was completely speechless. With this level, taking basic classes was a waste of time. He decided to go all out, pulling out the specialized exams of the academy's first year, throwing out one after another. He wanted to see where this girl's limits truly were. This time, Giannino couldn't sit still anymore. From the second year to the third year exams, Yulia somehow scored perfectly. How could this be an illiterate amateur? This was clearly a monster hiding her skills. On the outside, Yulia appeared calm, but inside, she was sweating bullets. After all, it had been years since she'd taken a test. There were a few parts she only vaguely remembered, but fortunately, she managed to pull through. Giannino then had an epiphany. Dr. Barron had sent him here not to teach basic knowledge, but to unearth this peerless gem. He decided to pull out all the stops and officially teach Yulia magic. However, Giannino had one condition: the lessons must take place in the magic tower in the royal palace, because only the equipment there was worthy of Yulia's talent. The moment she heard the words royal palace, she froze. Yulia froze. That was Randall's lair. If she was unlucky enough to run into him there, all her efforts to hide would be completely for nothing. But to grasp real power, Yulia gritted her teeth and agreed. It was just the royal palace. As long as she could become strong, she would bear this small risk. And so, before officially enrolling, Yulia went to the magic tower in the royal palace every day to train with her teacher Giannino. After spending more time with him, Yulia discovered that Giannino was already the head archmage. But in her memory, this teacher was supposed to be his successor. As for who the head archmage was in her previous life, she couldn't remember. But more than that, what worried Yulia most was bumping into Randall. Every day in the royal palace, she moved around in a state of constant fear, like playing hide-and-seek, afraid that man would suddenly pop out from some corner. Luckily, until the day before enrollment, Randall was nowhere to be seen. Yulia breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed her plan to hide this time was a complete success. Before leaving, Yulia made a special trip to say goodbye to Giannino, thanking him for his dedicated teaching during this time. Giannino was clearly reluctant to part with his genius student and bluntly expressed that as long as Yulia wanted, she could return to take his position at any time. After settling things with her teacher and getting a letter of recommendation, Yulia walked out of the magic tower with her books. After Giannino's praise, Yulia was walking back happily, thinking her plan was foolproof. Who knew her luck would run out? As she turned a blind corner, she bumped right into someone. The books in her hands scattered, and she fell to the ground. The other person quickly apologized, asking if she was hurt. Yulia looked up, and her heart almost skipped a beat. This red-haired guy was none other than Mark, Randall's attendant. If Mark was here, it meant his master was surely nearby. Before Yulia could run, a familiar voice came from above her head. Randall reassured Mark, while extending a hand to Yulia, his tone unbelievably gentle, asking if she was hurt. Yulia looked at the hand offered to her, her whole body numb. After avoiding him for so long, she finally ran into this man in such an ironic way. Randall proactively offered his hand and asked about her. This moment should have been a dream for countless young girls. But to Yulia, it was like seeing a ghost. She tried to stay calm and replied, "I hope your highness will be more careful in the future." Then, without looking back, she quickly fled. It was the crown prince's turn to get the cold shoulder. Mark, beside him, stomped his foot in frustration, thinking this girl was too rude. Randall, however, wasn't angry at all. Instead, he stared thoughtfully after her retreating figure. He thoughtfully made an excuse for her. This attitude of avoiding him like the plague only made him more interested. As the carriage drove away, Yulia clutched the book in her arms. In that moment just now, the dusty memories almost erupted out of control. Ami on the other side was worried sick, but Yulia just forced a smile, reassuring her that she was no longer a child, that the old stories had long passed. Today was an important day. She would officially move into the academy's dormitory and start her independent life. Before leaving, she said goodbye to her parents. Her father still maintained his stern face, telling her absolutely not to disgrace the family at the academy. His parting words held not a single point of warmth, just a cold command. Don't bring shame. Yulia could only nod obediently. Returning to the Count's domain for the past half-year, the distance between her and her family had only grown wider. In their eyes, Yulia was no longer the pampered daughter of before, but a failure who could lose control at any moment. The feeling of being abandoned by her family made her feel like a knife was twisting in her heart every second. Fortunately, Ami was with her on the way. Although the academy forbade bringing maids, Ami had already scouted the situation. She would work at a nearby clinic. Whenever Yulia wanted to see her, she could. Seeing Ami's serious face, the dark clouds in Yulia's heart finally dissipated a little. This journey to the academy, full of unknowns, didn't seem so scary after all. The carriage stopped in front of the academy dormitory. Yulia had thought the place would be shabby, but as she pushed open the door, the environment was even better than she had imagined. Only later did she find out her father had arranged the best room for her. It seems when it comes to maintaining the family's honor, that cold man didn't cut any corners. Seeing off a reluctant Ami, Yulia took a deep breath, silently encouraging herself. Just hold on until the weekend and they could meet again. Independent life wasn't scary at all. However, before she could adapt to the new environment, someone else in the noble circle couldn't sit still. Lady Clara of the ducal house had deliberately summoned the most prestigious families. This seemingly elegant tea party was actually a secret concubine selection. Clara, Clint, and Amelia started their gossip. These three most prestigious noble ladies all had their sights set on Crown Prince Randall. Who could refuse the position of future queen to get help? To be chosen by Randall, each of them carried a fierce ambition to win. During the party, Vera acted very generously, even preparing an exquisite meeting gift for all the ladies present. Lady Clara led the thanks, and on the surface, everyone was polite, acting like close sisters. But Vera's next words instantly froze the atmosphere. She said, "This isn't a song. It's not an ordinary necklace, but a protective amulet enchanted with detoxification magic. In the coming days at the academy, without this, it would be hard to stay alive." Vera's forward-thinking move directly terrified the ladies present. Clint was even more impressed, feeling that Vera's calculations were flawless. Since the leader had given a gift, the others naturally didn't dare to fall behind. Clara and Amelia competed to show off their treasures, claiming it was to strengthen their bonds, but in reality, no one wanted to lose in terms of prestige. Finally, Clara laid her cards on the table. Although everyone was here for Randall and all were men and fierce competitors, they still had to maintain a peaceful facade in the academy. Vera smiled faintly after hearing this, raised her teacup and said, "I sincerely hope we can become good friends." Looking at this group of women with sweet words and daggers in their hearts, the battle for the position of crown princess would likely be more brutal than imagined. The academy's opening ceremony finally arrived. Yulia deliberately wore a baggy uniform, just trying to be an invisible person in this world. As long as she hid in the back row, no one would probably notice her. After all, she didn't want to attract any more attention this time. To completely avoid Randall, she even deliberately gave up the prestigious S-class and resolutely moved down to A-class. She thought this way she could live out her days peacefully. Her family would surely be surprised too. Who knew that before she could celebrate, during the morning assembly, it was suddenly announced that the new student representative, His Highness Randall, would give a speech. The entire hall immediately erupted like a broken beehive. Yulia was completely petrified. It was true what they say. Be careful what you wish for. There was no escaping this fate. As soon as Randall appeared, all the female students in the hall screamed. The invisible pressure from his aura was truly overwhelming. From her corner, Yulia looked at the dashing young man on the stage, her heart filled with a million emotions. This image was completely different from what she remembered. The moment the speech ended, she felt Randall glance in her direction. That sharp gaze felt so real it made her flustered. But then she immediately snapped out of it. This must be a painful illusion. She was just an ordinary student now. How could she possibly attract his attention? However, when she saw the class list, Yulia froze again. She thought she was safe in A-class. But upon entering the class, she found herself to be the odd one out. She was the only one in the entire A-class specializing in magic. It would be hard to even find someone to talk to. What was more heartbreaking was those noble ladies had been drinking tea together since childhood and had already formed their own cliques. As for her, who had always been cooped up in the territory, she simply couldn't get a word in. Plus the baseless rumors outside, saying she was frail and sickly. As a result, the entire class now avoided her. Not a single person even greeted her. Seeing everyone heading to the cafeteria in groups, it would be a lie to say she wasn't lonely. But then again, wasn't this the result she wanted? As long as no one paid attention to her, she could live like a shadow. To survive in this world, what was a little loneliness? As long as she could get through her academy days safely, even if she had to eat alone, it was worth it. Who would have thought this meal would be the most delicious one Yulia had in 2 lifetimes? In the past, to become an exemplary queen, she could only gnaw on dry bread in a carriage. Now, she could finally sit down and quietly enjoy hot food. This feeling of freedom made her want to jump for joy. But her happiness was short-lived. The person she wanted to see least appeared before her with a food tray. Randall asked if he could sit there. Yulia froze. The cafeteria clearly had plenty of empty seats. But this group of people insisted on crowding her table. Now, even if she wanted to be invisible, she couldn't. What was worse was, Randall stared at her for a moment, then suddenly smiled and said, "You're the one Mark bumped into the other day, right?" Yulia's defenses completely crumbled. She had clearly pulled her sleeping cap down so low, yet she was still recognized. It seems her life at this academy was destined to be anything but peaceful. The moment Randall sat down, he started investigating her background, not only asking if Yulia wanted to be a court archmage, but also wondering why someone with her talent wasn't in the S-class. Yulia's head was spinning from the questions. She screamed for help internally. This crown prince, who was usually so cold, why was he so talkative today? Why was he so talkative today? Even his attendants couldn't stand it anymore and quickly reminded Randall not to scare the girl. As a result, Randall went even further, directly asking her what she was doing at the royal palace that day. Mark now understood the situation, apologizing while prying, determined to find out Yulia's secret in the royal palace. The three of them had assessed and completely surrounded her. Yulia felt she couldn't make up any more excuses. She just made up an excuse about having to find a teacher, picked up her tray, and bolted. Yulia ran for her life with her tray, regretting it deeply. She thought the sparsely populated cafeteria was the safest place. Who knew she'd be targeted by this group? She swore from now on she would stay rooted in her room. Watching Ilias fleeing back, the attendant beside him couldn't help but lean in and ask, "Your Highness, do you have an interest in this young lady?" Randall didn't deny it, but instead, he casually admitted it, saying he was truly curious about her. At this point, Mark beside him got excited. He stuffed meat into his mouth while prying. "This girl looks quite cute. Maybe she's Your Highness's type." The atmosphere suddenly became strange. The attendant suggested investigating her background. But Randall calmly took a sip of tea. Now is not the time. It seems this crown prince already had other plans in mind. Yulia thought she could escape by running, but she didn't know she had already become the crown prince's prey. She thought academy life would be exciting, but Yulia found it incredibly boring. In the morning, it was general classes, and in the afternoon, she could go home. New students in the magic department didn't even get to practice. Every day, besides submitting homework, she just sat there dazed. She didn't want to stand out, nor did she want to waste time here. If school was this boring, she might as well go find an old acquaintance to chat with. As soon as she had the idea, she snuck off to the inn outside the school. When Ami saw her, she wasn't surprised at all. Although she didn't know what her lady's personality was like, how could a servant not know? The inn run by Ami was doing very well, especially Graham's cooking, which was excellent. Ilya's mouth watered just looking at it. She originally wanted to stay and help, but seeing that even children were working, she had no chance to get involved. Ami took the opportunity to give her an idea. She said that Dr. Barron's clinic next door was short-staffed. Yulia suddenly remembered her past experiences. She really should go see this old doctor. She made a plan to come back for dinner with Ami that night and turned towards the clinic. After a few steps, she found the address. She gently knocked on the door. Faced with Dr. Barron's questioning gaze, she very naturally said, "I'm Ilya. We finally meet." The moment he saw Ilya, Dr. Barron's suspended heart began to finally settle. He hugged the little girl. As long as she could enroll smoothly, all his previous efforts were not in vain. But now was not the time to act. Ilya was truly a godsend. Don't be fooled by her young age, she knew how to handle wounds, deal with magical beasts, and even knew some healing magic. With this resume, being an assistant was a waste of her talent. It turned out that for the past few days, they poured into the city like a flood. Until the magical beasts were wiped out, the threshold of this clinic would sooner or later be trampled flat. As Yulia listened, she calculated. Once she got the hang of the work, maybe she should also join the fight against those beasts. Opening the door to the treatment room, the scene that met her eyes could only be described as tragic. Everywhere were the groans of the wounded, every second a race against death. Without a second word, Yulia changed her clothes and jumped into the fray. Although she wasn't some saint who could make severed limbs grow back, she could handle deep wounds. Wounds that went down to the bone. As the magical energy flowed through her fingers, the wounded soldier's condition finally stabilized. But her heart grew even more uneasy. What in the world was it for the first time? Kind of monster could injure so many experienced adventurers so horribly? Could it be that an ancient dragon had really appeared outside the city? For men, for men, for men, for men, for men. A leader of this caliber was definitely not something ordinary people could handle. After being busy for most of the day, Dr. Barron quickly urged her to go rest. Seeing Ilya's tired but determined expression, the doctor was very satisfied. As for Ilya, the doctor was very satisfied. She was busy thinking that tomorrow there would still be a pile of logs to stack. The magical beasts outside the city hadn't been cleared out yet. The wounded would surely continue to be brought in. Dr. Baron stopped her, hoping that Ilya could come help more often in the future. Ilya was willing and readily agreed. But she also specially reminded the doctor. Here, she was just an ordinary assistant. He must never call her young lady again. After everything was done, she hurried back to the inn. As soon as she entered, she saw the wounded she had treated earlier that day, now able to sit together, eating and drinking their fill. The sense of accomplishment from saving a life with her own hands. It was truly wonderful. Better than any reward. Ami had prepared hot soup and rice. Although it wasn't as elaborate as a noble's feast, everyone gathered together, eating and laughing. The whole room was filled with the warmth of everyday life. Ilya felt this kind of feeling. This real and warm feeling was the life she truly longed for. Just being with everyone, even if it was just one person. Just the simplest dinner was 100 times happier than a cold royal banquet. In the following days, Yulia entered a non-stop grinding mode. In the morning, she was happy, buried in books at the academy, and in the afternoon, she ran to the clinic to help with treatment. Although it was a bit tiring, this busyness gave her a very real feeling. Dr. Baron couldn't sit still either, taking advantage of the rare free time between patients. He offered to give Ilya a general checkup, especially the state of her magical energy. He seriously told Ilya, "Let me take a good look at your magic." Although Ilya nodded in agreement, her heart was pounding. Ever since that long dream, she could clearly feel the powerful energy surging inside her. Just how strong had this magical power become? The test results left even the doctor speechless. Even a captain's level wasn't enough. This level of magical power would rank among the top in the entire country. Even Ilya herself didn't expect this transformation to bring her so much power. Just then, the monster subjugation outside the city finally ended. Who would have thought the culprit this time was a pack of lizardmen? Although Ilya now had enough power to take them all on by herself, she still wanted to learn more healing skills. Even though the number of patients at the clinic had decreased, she still continued to help out every week. More than anyone, she understood clearly that as long as she bore the title of noble, she would never be able to treat men. The people in that family would not let her go easily. Therefore, she had to plan a way out for herself. Either become a free adventurer or enter the palace as a mage. While struggling with her future plans, Yulia made a new friend at the academy. A girl named Liso had a very pleasant personality, and her family was in the big business trade. The two of them often went on picnics on the academy grounds. The days passed peacefully and quietly. But deep down, Yulia still felt something was missing. Thinking carefully, since that fateful day, she hadn't met Crown Prince Randall again. To avoid Crown Prince Randall, Yulia really had to rack her brain, even for mealtimes. She also deliberately arranged her schedule. As long as she could stay far away from that group, she would rather her afternoon schedule be packed. Who could bring her back? Who would have thought that while she was busy hiding on her side, her best friend Liso on the other side would run into trouble? The student council actually took the initiative to approach her, inviting Liso to join as an accountant. This time, Yulia really couldn't sit still anymore. You have to know that the student council is a gathering of the elite. The elite among the elite. Although Liso was outstanding, she wasn't at the level to be specially recruited. Moreover, the student council was currently under the direct control of Randall. Liso naively thought that maybe because her family was in business, they saw her talent for calculations. However, Yulia had a feeling something was wrong. This pie falling from the sky was definitely hiding some kind of conspiracy. If their real target was her, then Liso's current situation was indeed very dangerous. After saying goodbye to Liso, Yulia went straight to the clinic. At this moment, her heart was in turmoil. She wanted to find Dr. Baron for advice. She planned to make a living with magic after graduation, but now there were two paths before her. One was to enter the palace as a mage, and the other was to become a free adventurer. Entering the palace meant a stable job, but seeing him day and night was unavoidable. She would definitely run into Randall's group. But if she chose to be an adventurer, her noble status would become a huge stumbling block. A huge obstacle in her way. After hearing her out, Dr. Barron also fell silent. He understood very well that if Yulia didn't decisively cut ties with her family, she would sooner or later be used as a political marriage tool. But once she gave up her noble status, she would have to face all the dangers out there alone. This was truly a difficult problem. If she wasn't careful, she could lose the rest of her life. While Yulia was struggling with these intertwined thoughts, a sentence from Dr. Barron made her feel as if she had woken up. If she couldn't make the decision herself, Dr. Barron couldn't make it for her. Why not take a few quests at the guild before you graduate and see how it goes? At worst, you can just quit. Yulia was a person of action. No sooner said than done, she immediately ran home, rummaged through her things looking for equipment, and finally, her eyes landed on the deer skull mask hanging on the wall. Her maid Ami saw it, and her eyes widened in surprise, feeling that this item was too hardcore, not matching what I had seen, and didn't match the aura of a young lady at all. But to Yulia, it looked cool and on fire. This was the perfect treasure to hide her identity. Early the next morning, she said goodbye to Liso, put on a neat black robe, and then put on the heavy deer skull mask. Looking in the mirror, an enigmatic figure that even her own mother would have trouble recognizing, Yulia was satisfied and stepped out the door. In a place like the guild, rank is everything. Graham was already a B-rank big shot while Yulia and Ami were just D-rank newbies. This time, she decided to go out on her own, even though she had already found a reason for herself. She was still a little nervous. To be safe, she chose the simplest quest. Go into the forest and catch some forest rabbits. She thought her first solo mission would be tough. But who knew these little monsters were nothing to her? She handled them neatly in a flash. For the first time, she had completed a song. After earning her own reward money, Yulia was overjoyed. However, Ami was very calm, insisting that she take off that scary deer skull mask. It was true. Walking down the street looking like that would attract too much attention to be able to return to school. Without anyone knowing, Yulia had no choice but to cast a spell on herself. As long as others didn't stare at her, they would automatically treat her like air. Although this method was a bit tiring, it was worth the effort to successfully hide her identity. To protect her noble facade, the mask was still the safest measure. Yulia even suspected that the strangely masked people in the guild might also be colleagues flying incognito. And so, Yulia started a busy life with various roles. In the morning, she was a model student at the academy. In the afternoon, she wore a mask and took on quests at the guild, and sometimes she had to drop by Dr. Barron's clinic to help out. Life revolved around these 3 points, and although it was a bit tiring, she felt alive, more fulfilled than ever. However, those peaceful days didn't last long. That day during a tea party, Liso, who was always lively, was suddenly gloomy, looking full of worries. Liso lowered her voice and confided, "Yulia, I'm so worried." Liso stood up. With a sad face, she complained that the exam this time was ridiculously difficult. She couldn't help but worry about Yulia. Yulia didn't hesitate to promise her best friend a study retreat in the library. Thanks to that, Liso found her solid support again. Who knew that when it was actually time to study, Yulia realized she didn't need to put in any effort at all. Just by flipping through a few pages, she could memorize everything like the back of her hand, and she even tutored her best friend. From all-powerful, Liso was completely impressed, repeatedly exclaiming that for someone of Yulia's level to be stuck in a regular class was a huge waste. She should be a top student in the S class. However, while the atmosphere was very relaxed, Liso suddenly changed the subject. She announced that she had decided not to join the student council. Ilya understood her friend's feelings. Although the academy was supposedly equal, once you were targeted by the nobles, the bright days ahead would certainly not be easy. It's true what they say, be careful what you wish for. The young master of the count's family, Zolan, showed up right at this moment. He even seemed very interested in the two girls. Yulia just wanted to quickly see him off. She pointed into the distance and said someone was looking for him, hoping he would leave this troublesome place quickly. Who knew, this young master not only didn't care but also walked straight towards Liso, insisting on personally tutoring her. It was rumored that although Zolan was handsome, he was known as an iceberg, to whom he was always cold and indifferent. So now, what was he planning with this unusual behavior? Yulia worried internally that if those noble ladies misunderstood her relationship with this young master, she could forget about having any peaceful days in the future. Zolan was not polite at all. Relying on his status as an S-class top student, he naturally took Yulia's place to tutor and even planned to tutor her as well. Yulia saw that the situation was not good. Without saying a word, she turned and fled, her mouth saying she didn't want to disturb the two of them, but in her mind, she was thinking of the best escape plan. Poor Liso was left all alone, trapped by Zolan in the library, forced to study from morning till night. This wasn't tutoring, this was clearly torture. The moment they finally had a chance to meet, Liso tearfully begged Yulia for help, desperately wanting to drag her along to study. Yulia could only manage a polite smile. This hard work, you should enjoy it yourself. Liso felt something was off. She tearfully suspected she was just bait, thinking that Zolan was actually using her to get close to Yulia. Yulia quickly tried to persuade her, since you have a top-notch tutor personally helping you, just take this opportunity to perform well and don't overthink things. After sending Liso off, Yulia enjoyed the peace again. She holed up in her room to study magic by herself. Whenever she got stuck, she would immediately text Giannino. This archmage was like a 24/7 support hotline. Every message was answered within a minute. The final exam finally arrived. While the rest of the world was struggling to pass, Yulia was struggling with how to control her score. She didn't want to stand out. She deliberately left a few major questions blank, deciding to aim for a rank outside the top 20. Done. Liso was ecstatic, certain she would make the top 10 this time. Turning to ask about Yulia's situation, she could only laugh bitterly. After all, the pain of deliberately failing a test couldn't be told to others. The exam ended, and the long vacation officially began. For the nobility, the real social gatherings were just beginning. Everywhere were tea parties, endless balls. Yulia was secretly happy for the peace and quiet. After all, no one invited her to those noisy places. But there was one gathering she couldn't escape even if she wanted to. That was the mandatory tea party hosted by the royal family. Just thinking about having to show her face there gave Yulia a headache. In the crown prince's inner circle, Zolan was reminiscing about their past. As the prime minister's son, he had been by Randall's side since childhood. With Mark, one practiced swordsmanship, the other read books. They had been by Randall's side from childhood until now. The three of them were not just master and servants, but also close brothers who could share everything. When they entered the academy, the core force of the royal family was officially revealed. Besides the familiar faces, Randall also recruited two powerful assistants. Odilon, the Marquis's son, specialized in intelligence gathering, acting as the crown prince's eyes and ears, and Donnie, the Viscount's son, a young man skilled in both literary and martial arts, who often sparred with Mark. It could be said that the crown prince was now surrounded by exceptional talents. In the eyes of outsiders, Randall was always a gentle crown prince. Just one of his smiles was enough to make the noble ladies fall for him. When he was young, he was also very sociable, often happily mingling with the girls at tea parties. But no one expected that one day he suddenly changed. Not only did he cut off all social activities, but he also became quiet and reserved. Sometimes when they talked, he wouldn't react at all, just silently gazing out the window, as if his mind had drifted to some distant place. Looking at his appearance, they were very uneasy, always feeling that one day he would disappear without a trace. Until he was 7 years old, that girl appeared at the fiancé selection tea party that year. Randall didn't pay attention to anyone, causing the king and queen great distress. Well, the second prince had just been born, so this matter was temporarily put aside. Honestly, Randall's intelligence sometimes made people scared. Sometimes I even wondered, was there a soul older than me hidden inside that small body? To keep up with him, Mark and I really had to exhaust ourselves. But it was also because of that outsiders' opinions of us grew higher and higher. All three of us got into the elite class, but Randall remained indifferent towards women, which made the queen unable to sit still any longer. She secretly selected a group of young ladies as candidates, including Vera's group. These young ladies could all achieve what the young ladies could. These noble ladies were polite on the surface, but behind the scenes, they secretly fought each other for the position of crown princess. Getting tired of that scene, we had to hide in the student council office all day. However, amidst the chaos, I noticed Randall's eyes were always following one figure. The only figure. That girl was Yulia. Yulia's identity was truly a mystery. Although she was the daughter of a count, she could answer for herself. She had never appeared in any social event. This was truly strange in the noble circle, since Randall was interested in her so much. As his best friend, I had to help him dig up this girl's background. So I assigned the task to the person specializing in intelligence gathering to investigate Yulia's background thoroughly. However, a short time later, when the investigation report was in the building in hand, I was completely stunned. Zolan stared at the words on the paper, unable to speak for a long time. Who knew that Yulia's backing was so deep? On the outside, everyone thought she had been frail since childhood, always hiding in her territory to recuperate, but you really can't judge. In reality, the person who taught her was none other than the renowned head archmage. The nurturing and those tricks couldn't have come from an ordinary girl. The deeper he dug, the more mysteries surrounding this girl piled up. Mark, standing beside him, had an idea. If you're so curious, why not pull the people around her into the student council? Zolan didn't answer after hearing this, just silently calculated in his head. It seems he had to personally meet this girl this time. The student council was short of a treasurer, and Zolan immediately set his sights on Liso. She thought this was a golden opportunity to change her life, but Liso hesitated. When she was brought before Randall, the crown prince personally invited her. Anyone else would have surely gone crazy with joy, but Liso refused on the spot. She said, "I'm just an ordinary person, not qualified to be near the crown prince, not even a man." She even begged everyone to pretend today never happened. Randall was also confused. He clearly appreciated her talent, so why did it scare people so much? Could it be that someone was pulling the strings from behind? In fact, Liso understood better than anyone. Although the academy was known as a place of equality, the rules outside were what really ruled. The noble ladies vying for the position of crown princess had already warned her. This matter was really difficult to resolve. For that position, they dared to utter the most malicious threats. Liso could only stay far away. Mark also had to complain to the crown prince. Those women are as persistent as leeches. Whenever Randall appeared, they would surround him with no escape. Trying to find a chance for a private conversation in the school was harder than climbing to the heavens. Yulia usually stayed in her room, not even bothering to go to the cafeteria. While Zolan was in a dilemma, he happened to see an unexpected scene in the library. Lisa was clinging to Yulia, asking for help with her homework, while Yulia was holding a strange magic book. This clearly wasn't studying for an exam, but more like she was engrossed in studying some kind of forbidden knowledge. He stared at their backs, a bold plan flashing in his mind. Zolan had intended to talk to Yulia directly, but this girl was unbelievably cautious. The moment she sensed something was off, she abandoned her friend and fled. This top student was no pushover either. Having lost his main target, he decided to set up camp with Liso. Studying in the library every day, cultivating their relationship while skillfully extracting information. A girl said. A naive girl like Liso was no match for him. With just a few sentences, she spilled everything about Yulia. She said that Yulia was actually well-liked in class, but there was always an aura around her that made no one dare to approach her. The strangest thing was that Yulia often disappeared for a while after each class, and no one knew where she went. Even Liso, her closest friend, was kept in the dark. Zolan smiled after hearing this. Even her closest companion was kept in the dark. It seems there was something. The secrets of this blonde young lady were more fascinating than he had imagined. The day the academy announced the results arrived, Randall naturally took the top spot. Liso also excelled, placing 6th. However, the focus of attention shifted to Yulia. Who would have thought Yulia landed exactly in 30th place? She looked a bit disappointed, but inside, she was celebrating. This position wasn't too flashy, but was still enough to hold on. In the elite class, a perfect hiding spot. Liso, standing beside her, kept comforting her, saying this rank was already worth celebrating. Then Ilya blurted out, "Actually, I only started with a tutor half a year ago, and I started from the very basics." Hearing this, Liso was petrified. The score she had to work so hard for was, in the eyes of a top genius, just a passing game. Seeing Ilya's indifferent expression, Liso couldn't help but ask curiously if she intended to become a court archmage in the future. Ilya just smiled. She hadn't decided on her future path yet. It's true what they say, be careful what you wish for. Yulia was looking for a peaceful place, but Randall brazenly led his people straight to her. Liso quickly pulled her to bow. Scared of making a mistake in etiquette, Randall appeared quite friendly. First, he politely praised Liso's excellent performance in the exam, even surpassing many other top students. But then his gaze shifted to Yulia, his tone carrying a profound and inscrutable air. Yulia did well too, placing exactly 30th. The moment the words left his mouth, Yulia's heart skipped a beat. Although Randall still had a smile on his lips, his gaze just now was chillingly cold. In that moment, Randall's gaze was clearly different. Could it be he had really seen through something? Yulia quickly humbled herself, just hoping to send this Buddha away quickly. But what she feared most happened. Randall took the initiative, suggesting they stay and have lunch together, using the excuse of avoiding his pursuers. Yulia was completely cornered. The seemingly peaceful picnic instantly turned into a large-scale social event. With eyes and ears beside her, Yulia had only one single thought. This meal was impossible to swallow. Just when she wanted to become invisible, her beautiful nose. Zolan's attention suddenly turned to her. Faced with the unexpected question, Yulia decided that she would play dumb and casually make up a dream of being a wandering mage. She thought she could get away with it, but his next sentence almost made her choke on her food. Zolan actually asked if she was interested in competing for the position of crown princess. This joke had gone too far. Yulia was stunned for half a day. Her brain worked at full capacity, frantically trying to put herself down. From her ordinary background to her ordinary background, to being frail and sick, she even blurted out that no one would want her. She lowered herself to a worthless state, just to completely extinguish his intentions. As long as she could live freely, what was a little face? Witnessing her smooth as water rejection. Randall, sitting beside her, said nothing. This act was truly excellent, but whether it could fool this crown prince was another question. Looking at Randall before her, Yulia's mind was filled with all the terrible things from her past life. Back then, also at a tea party, they had arranged their engagement. Everyone was convinced it was a match made in heaven. During their early engagement, the two of them indeed had peaceful days. No matter how busy he was, he always tried to make time for tea with her. Yulia once naively believed that they truly cared for each other. However, all of that completely vanished after they entered the academy. Randall began to revolve around Vera, leaving his fiancée in a corner. The feeling of being a man. The feeling of being abandoned by the whole world, she would never forget it in this lifetime. He chose someone else in the past, so why was he here teasing her now? Thinking about that cold past, Yulia's heart had long turned to stone. She understood. Now, she would never be deceived by this gentle facade again. The meal ended. Yulia didn't want to stay a second longer and quickly found an excuse to slip away. Before leaving, she didn't forget a polite remark, saying that this place would be left to them for peace and quiet. She thought she could retreat smoothly, but who knew? Randall suddenly asked if she had any plans next. Yulia's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly nodded in acknowledgement. Afraid he would pull some other trick. Watching Yulia's receding back, Randall stood rooted to the spot slowly, pondering for a long time. No one knew what he was thinking. At that moment, Yulia had already rushed to her next destination. She entered Dr. Baron's office. As soon as she entered Dr. Baron's office, she eagerly asked if her healing magic had improved. After receiving an affirmative answer, Yulia breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed her efforts had not been in vain. In this dangerous academy, the power she held in her own hands was the most reliable amulet. Dr. Baron was very pleased with Yulia's performance, although her control over her magic was still a bit novice, but with diligent practice, she would surely become a top healer in the future. On the surface, Yulia nodded obediently, but in her heart, she was thinking that compared to saving people, she really wanted to unleash her attacks on her enemies more. Discussing the upcoming long vacation, Yulia originally planned to stay at the dorms. After all, returning to that house was meaningless. But to show respect to her parents, she still decided to go back just to make an appearance. Even her maid Ami was worried that she would feel wronged going back there alone. Back in her room, Yulia took a risk and wrote to her father, fully expecting a scolding. Who knew the reply would come surprisingly fast? Her father not only didn't make her come home, but also made a request that gave her a headache. The letter said her performance at the academy was truly amazing. Since she had brought honor to the family, there was no need to return to the territory. She should just go directly to the tea party at the royal palace. The vacation was supposed to be for finding peace, but now it had turned into forced socializing at the royal palace. It seemed she couldn't avoid this mess. Her father had clearly instructed in the letter that he would send a maid with a formal dress tomorrow. Other matters were as vague as usual. However, Yulia wasn't sad at all. On the contrary, she felt this was a great piece of good news from the heavens. Not having to go home meant she could continue to stay in the dormitory. She excitedly contacted Dr. Baron and Ami right away, planning to go big during this vacation. Not only would she focus on training her healing magic, but she also wanted to take on more quests of the guild. Life without anyone's control was truly free, but thinking about the tea party at the royal palace, her enthusiasm dropped by more than half. She thought the royal palace only held balls. Who knew they'd come up with this tea party idea this year? The thought of having to keep facing Randall already gave her a headache. The academy gate was bustling with carriages waiting to take students home. Although she was happily saying goodbye to her friends, when asked about her vacation plans, Yulia just gave a faint smile, saying that she would stay in the dormitory to study. In fact, everyone tacitly understood that the so-called home no longer had a place for her. Instead of going back there to get upset, she'd rather hide alone in the academy. Enjoying this rare peace, a knock on the door sounded. The crowd of girls sent by her family had arrived, not only bringing a large number of people. They also carried a stack of design sketches, under the pretext of preparing for the upcoming tea party. The scale this time was truly not small. All of the family's exclusive designers were mobilized. From tea party dresses, casual palace wear, to even ball gowns, Everything was prepared, just waiting for Yulia's final approval. Looking at the room packed with maids and sketches, Yulia felt dizzy for a moment. These dresses, each one more splendid than the last, were all designed to royal standards. It seems this time the family really wanted her to show off to the designers. The prince was casually flipping through a design when something caught her eye. Yulia's gaze froze, her heart skipping a beat. These dresses were all nightmares from her past life. One was soaked with tea. One was criticized by Randall as being old-fashioned, and there was even one that was bribed, secretly cutting up her formal dress in the middle of the night. Looking at these designs, Yulia knew that in this life, she absolutely could not repeat her past mistakes. She casually pointed to a few simple styles. If she didn't want to attract anyone's attention, then she should just be humble to the end. The maids were stunned. Wearing this to such an important occasion, was it really okay? Yulia just coldly replied, "Anyway, no one invited me. Just sew it and leave it." She left the room without a second glance. Finally, it was vacation time. After enduring the last few hours, Yulia finally got her dream-long vacation. However, the vacation of this young lady wasn't for drinking tea and chatting. She had arranged a schedule for herself with 3 different identities. At the clinic, she was Yuna, a man, a diligent commoner nurse. Dr. Barron always praised her. But this identity also had its own troubles. As soon as she healed a wounded soldier, he proposed to her in front of everyone. Yulia sighed wearily. How many times has it been? She casually cast a healing spell, gave some instructions, and quickly slipped away. It didn't stop there. Following Graham's advice, as long as she put on the deer skull mask, she would transform into the male adventurer Yusufu at the guild. Due to time constraints, she only dared to take on small jobs. Now that she had a full 3-day break, she decided to go big. If she was going to do it, she had to take on many. The most difficult quests. Yulia aimed for the quest with the highest reward, to eliminate a spider demon that was destroying crops. This quest was no joke. She fully equipped herself with potions and weapons, and eagerly rushed to the scene. The monster before her was tens of times larger than a normal wild boar. Several strong men were being chased by it. No wonder the reward was so generous. Yulia wasn't scared at all. She seized the opportunity and directly cast a huge magic circle in the air. The power of this attack was so terrifying that with just a loud boom, the monster that was just showing off was flattened on the ground, completely dead. With the monster lying motionless, Yulia finally breathed a sigh of relief. It seems her current strength was more than enough to deal with huge creatures like this. But if she only used pure strength to hunt monsters, it would be hard to get rich. Yulia looked at the crushed spider demon and silently assessed it. In this state, submitting it to the guild would probably only fetch the lowest price. To make more money, she had to know how to butcher them. She immediately rushed to the guild's storage room and flipped through the monster encyclopedia. It turned out there was a lot to this. To get the meat, you had to bleed it first. To get the skin and fur, you couldn't. She felt that only by preserving the materials perfectly could she hope to get extra money. Yulia read engrossed, taking careful notes and pondering. This wasn't hunting, this was clearly a guide to getting rich. Crap. When she came to her senses, it was already dark. Perfect. She tiptoed into the house and was caught by Ami. Looking at Ami's glare that looked like she wanted to eat her alive, Yulia could only shrink back and apologize. Busted. On the first day of vacation, she almost blew her secret. Although Ami gave her a lecture, Yulia felt incredibly warm. The feeling of someone worrying and caring for her was 1,000 times better than the cold life in the royal palace. Because it was too late, she decided to stay the night at Ami's inn, helping everyone carry things, cleaning up, and then gathering around a hot meal like a real family. This was the vacation she longed for. The next few days, Yulia let loose. 3 days, at this time, Yulia will no longer live. When the adventurers went into the forest to hunt monsters, She took the opportunity to help at the clinic, by the way. She also pocketed 2 salaries. Seeing the amount of gold in her secret fund growing, her heart still swelled with joy. Hunting monsters not only made money, but also helped relieve stress. What a life! This was the best. However, those beautiful days passed in a flash of 2 weeks, until she saw the invitation on the table. Yulia was stunned. She had been so engrossed in making money that she had completely forgotten about the most important royal tea party. If she stood up the crown prince, the consequences would be unimaginable. Though her heart was 100 times unwilling, Yulia still had to brace herself and return to the so-called home. The moment she stepped through the door, a cold, suffocating atmosphere hit her. It was clearly her own home, but she was put in the guest room. The room was completely empty, without a single personal item of hers. Could this place really be called home? Before she could even exhale, trouble came again. Her father ordered her to attend the tea party tomorrow. And there must be no mistakes whatsoever. The next few hours were a nightmare for her. From changing clothes to an endless etiquette check. She was like a beautiful doll being spun around by the servants. By the time she appeared at the party, every single one of Yulia's movements was flawless. Her elegant demeanor was impeccable. Not a single flaw could be found. Even the strictest etiquette officer had to nod in approval. Who would have thought that this elegance, etched into her very bones, was honed through her days working part-time at the inn? Habit is truly a scary thing. Even though her status had changed, the days she spent with him, Ami was still silently polishing her. She thought that returning to this house would mean everything would be the same. Yulia sat alone at the tea table, indifferently nibbling on a piece of cake. She really didn't want to stay a second longer at these hypocritical social gatherings. Just then, the two met again. 2 small figures suddenly approached. Jonas smiled brightly and said, "Sister, the cake here is delicious, isn't it?" Before she could even react, her 2 younger brothers greeted her in unison, "Welcome home, Sister Yulia." Hearing this enthusiastic greeting, Yulia's heart suddenly skipped a beat. These 2 younger brothers usually didn't even give her a second glance. Why the sudden change of heart today? It seems some people's nature will never change in this lifetime. Yulia casually cast a silence spell, instantly muting her 2 noisy younger brothers. They couldn't even break a simple spell like this. It seems the noble upbringing of these 2 wasn't up to standard. The father who had named them couldn't sit still any longer. He walked over with a grim face, demanding. Yulia immediately removed the spell, while forcing his 2 sons to bow their heads and apologize. Hearing the 2 boys still arguing back, the father's tone suddenly turned cold, reminding them that Yulia was their older sister, not an outsider. Only now did they remember to call her sister. This fake apology. Yulia didn't need it. Because of the tea party tomorrow, Yulia would have nothing. She outwardly chose to obey, agreeing to wear the formal dress they had prepared. Her father coldly threw out a sentence, "Don't disgrace the family." Her mother, though, kept staring at her but didn't say a word from beginning to end. This silence made people feel even more uneasy. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Clara was explaining. She was a mess, insisting on attending tomorrow's tea party, but was being held back by her brother, who knew this act wasn't out of any love at all. The doctor secretly informed her brother that the medicine was working very well and the dose needed to be increased for another week. Looking at the bowl of black medicine, her brother's eyes showed no trace of pity. At the royal palace tea party tomorrow, it seemed someone had long since set a trap. For this tea party, the maids had put in a lot of effort. Yulia wore a splendid blue dress and stepped onto the carriage heading to the royal palace. Anyone with a discerning eye could easily see. This party was personally hosted by Crown Prince Randall under the guise of a youth gathering. But in reality, it was a concubine selection to find the future queen. A small mistake on such occasions was enough to be kicked out of the game. Yulia was well aware of this. If she acted too capriciously, the family's reputation would be tarnished. So, she decided to change her strategy. As long as she obediently became a faint shadow, she could both maintain her family's honor and not attract anyone's attention. According to the rules, failure meant that the men, but they could not participate in their lives. The higher the status, the closer the seating to the crown prince. But this time, for the convenience of socializing, the organizers did not arrange fixed seats. This was exactly what Yulia wanted. She deliberately chose the most secluded spot. The carriage stopped in front of the royal palace gate. Yulia took a deep breath and stepped into the familiar garden. Every tree and blade of grass here immediately brought back painful memories. This was once where she received training to become queen, and also the beginning of the nightmare in her past life. She had really returned to this place, back to the cage that once suffocated her in that warm moment. At that moment, she even thought about faking a faint and running away. But if she caused trouble now, the entire family's reputation would be tarnished. Yulia clenched the hem of her dress, forcing herself to calm down. If she couldn't escape, she might as well take the initiative. She no longer chose to hide, but walked straight towards that table. The tea party was already packed. The most prestigious young ladies were gathered together, appearing very close. But in reality, everyone was secretly sizing each other up. Yulia carefully observed the seating. The last seats were reserved for the baron class. A young lady from a count's family like her would stand out even more if she sat there. She was about to use the excuse of not feeling well to hide in the most secluded corner, but then she thought, what if the crown prince used that as an excuse to come and ask about her health? That would be big trouble. In the end, she chose a harmonious position, not too close and not too far, planning to just quietly eat some sweets and get through this time peacefully, which would be a victory. However, just as she breathed a sigh of relief, an unexpected voice suddenly sounded in her ear, asking if they could sit next to her. Yulia was stunned. Who would have thought Zolan would show up uninvited and plop down next to her? On the surface, Yulia was polite, but inside, she was screaming in anger. She hadn't agreed to let him sit down. As the crown prince's attendant, he should be doing his job instead of slacking off here and acting as if it was natural. However, his next words made the atmosphere instantly drop. It was said that a fiancé candidate had mysteriously disappeared. It turned out the missing person was Clara. Now, only her younger sister could temporarily take her place. Seeing the girl's worried expression, she probably still didn't understand the situation. Zolan suddenly changed the subject, starting to pry into Yulia's private life, asking why she usually disappeared without a trace. This was clearly an attempt to dig for information to verify the rumors about her health condition. Were the rumors about her health condition the truth or not? Although she found this person very rude, Yulia still maintained a reserved attitude. She smiled and replied, I just don't want something to suddenly happen during the party and cause trouble for everyone. This move of retreating 1 step to advance 3 completely shut down any further words from Zolan. With Randall's speech, the tea party finally officially began. Looking at the exquisite pastries on the table, Yulia completely surrendered. You have to know, whether in the territory or at the academy, getting sweets to eat was harder than picking stars from the sky. As she stuffed a cake into her mouth, she thought to herself that she usually only got snacks from patients when she helped at the clinic. Because she was so engrossed in eating, she didn't notice Zolan staring at her. Zolan teased, Miss Yulia seems to really like sweets. Yulia suddenly felt embarrassed and quickly stopped, regaining her dignified and noble demeanor. Just then, Yulia was feeling awkward. A group of noble ladies suddenly rushed over. They crowded around Zolan, showering him with praise. Fortunately, their appearance saved Yulia. She quickly moved aside, but her seat was now in a place with no one. For these enthusiastic fans, and just like that, Yulia could peacefully finish the rest of the sweets. As she nibbled, she observed, noticing that around Randall were all high-ranking nobles, while minor characters like her sat peacefully in their own circle. When she was full and felt it was time to leave, a scream suddenly echoed from a distance, tearing through the peaceful atmosphere of the party. No one expected the elegant tea party to instantly turn into a living hell. A pillar of light. A huge pillar shot up into the sky. Immediately after, countless hideous monsters appeared from the void and began to wreak havoc throughout the castle. Randall reacted the fastest, commanding the guards while loudly reassuring everyone to stay calm. Yulia didn't care about hiding her power anymore, quickly confirming the safety of those around her. However, the scene before her was completely beyond her understanding. Where did these monsters come from? Screams tore through the hall. The elegant tea party instantly became chaotic. Randall rushed to check on the injured, calling out, "Hey, wake up, are you okay?" Who would have thought this proper gathering would turn into a hunting ground for monsters? The guards had drawn their swords, but facing these creatures, a pack of ferocious monsters, the situation was difficult to control. Looking at the tragic scene before her, Yulia had attended many parties, but she had never seen such a terrifying scene. The transport gate was still opening, but packs of giant wolves and all sorts of magical beasts were pouring into every corner. Amidst the chaos, Zolan was anxiously searching everywhere. Where on earth was Yulia? But he never would have guessed, Yulia was not only not hiding, but also she remained terrifyingly calm. This was not the normal reaction of a girl. Seeing the growing number of monsters, Yulia knew that hiding was useless now. She immediately activated the communication magic circle with Archmage Giannino. The royal palace is being overrun by monsters. Giannino was also shocked by this news. He immediately replied, "I'll be right there." Although reinforcements were on the way, the monsters were about to arrive. Giannino instructed through the communication device, "You must hold out until I arrive." Yulia gritted her teeth and risked it. She jumped onto the dining table and cast a huge magic shield. Randall stood not far away. It seemed he didn't expect this girl to possess such explosive power. Yulia also sighed internally. Standing on the table was really ruining her image, but what? In this crucial moment of survival, who cared about the title of a proper lady anymore? The monsters outside the shield grew more ferocious. She knew that the noble-style training at the academy, in the face of this, in this life-or-death world, was just child's play. This was the first time Yulia had tried to maintain such a large-scale defensive line. Unexpectedly, the effect was surprisingly good. Zolan rushed over to confirm, "Are you okay?" Yulia, while maintaining the shield, instructed, "Protect the inside well. Don't let the monsters get in at all costs." Although the shield temporarily blocked the attacks, the night order outside was about to collapse. The number of casualties was constantly increasing. Yulia sighed in distress. Compared to this passive defense, she really wanted to fight back directly. In that life-or-death moment, several bright lights suddenly descended from the sky. Giannino and the archmages finally arrived. The moment the reinforcements appeared, the situation instantly turned. High-level spells rained down, striking the monster horde. Looking at the portal in front of her, Yulia's hands were itching to fight. Giannino nodded, "Then let's destroy it together." Yulia's finishing blow left Giannino wide-eyed. This level of magic power was truly on a destructive scale. He quickly directed her, "Pump magic power in here, then detonate it directly from the outside." As Yulia placed the train had already placed the train in. As she operated it, she found it strange. The royal palace's defenses were so tight, how did this portal get in? He couldn't help but praise, as expected of a student trained by Dr. Baron, "Your progress is truly remarkable." Yulia quickly stopped him, "For dangerous matters like this, please don't involve the doctor." The portal was finally dealt with. But looking back, Yulia realized she seemed to have caused some trouble. She had used all her strength to cast the spell. She had expanded the shield's range too much, accidentally trapping Randall inside as well. The situation was now a bit awkward. Although the monsters had been cleared, the banquet hall had long been cleared, turned into a wreck. Randall immediately checked if Yulia was injured. Meanwhile, Giannino frowned at a noble lady lying on the ground. He squatted down to check and found This girl was barely breathing, her pulse so weak it was almost imperceptible. Yulia saw her teacher's reaction. Her heart pounded. She quickly asked what was going on. Giannino stared at the wound, his words trailing off. Who would have thought these innocent girls would be turned into sacrifices? The marks on their backs were truly horrifying. Yulia was about to destroy the magic circle when Giannino stopped her. This thing. You must not touch it carelessly, or you could lose your life. These high-level curses. Not many people in the entire royal palace could break them. Seeing her classmates writhing in pain, and being able to do nothing but watch, Yulia felt extremely uncomfortable. Could she really only stand by and watch this time? Randall felt something was wrong and quickly approached to ask about the situation. Giannino stared at the strange symbols. This was indeed an ancient language that had been lost for a long time. Yulia, standing beside him, saw everything clearly. She had actually studied this type of curse before, but in this critical situation, she didn't dare to gamble with people's lives. Fortunately, Giannino was experienced and finally managed to break one curse. He quickly called Giannino to have Yulia cooperate. One person would be responsible for breaking the curse, the other for healing. The moment she took over, Yulia was stunned. The magic power in this girl's body had been completely drained. That monster didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was because there was a tree that had used these girls as a source of energy, cruelly exchanging their lives. On her side, Yulia finally finished. The victimized girl was out of danger. Giannino also rushed over to check. Everyone was not seriously injured. The danger had been averted. Yulia waved her hand and withdrew the magic shield. The bright sunlight once again illuminated the hall, but this mess was not yet cleaned up. Monster corpses were scattered everywhere. The scene was a mess of flesh and blood. If the noble ladies saw this, they would surely faint. Yulia thoughtfully cleaned up the scene. Just then, Vera led a group of nobles to surround Randall, asking about his well-being. The atmosphere was suddenly noisy and lively. Looking at the crown prince surrounded by the crowd, Yulia had no idea she had any intention of stepping into that corner of joy. Giannino felt the scene was not right for him. Seeing the chaos, he suggested taking Yulia to a room to rest first. Randall watched them leave, his eyes filled with complex emotions. In the study, Yulia finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. The scene just now was truly terrifying. Who could have guessed that someone would dare to use a magic circle in the royal palace? Seeing her tired, Giannino casually took out a handful of strange leaves and put them in a house. He gave them to her and told her to chew them quickly, saying they could help her recover her magic power. Although she was full of doubts, Yulia still obediently put them in her mouth. The result was that the taste was indescribably horrible, so bitter it made her want to split open. But bitter medicine is effective. As the bitterness faded, the depleted magic power from before finally returned to her body bit by bit. Seeing Yulia's pained expression, Giannino couldn't help but laugh. Who would have thought this girl would chew a whole bunch of bitter herbs just to restore her magic power? As Yulia chewed, she complained, "This exclusive snack of the Archmage tastes is really strong. Can you give me a heads up next time?" Joking was one thing, but when he mentioned today's attack, Giannino's expression suddenly became serious. The royal palace's defense system had become a mere decoration. Someone had to take responsibility for this. He sincerely praised Yulia. "If it weren't for your timely magic shield, I'm afraid none of the noble children would have survived today." Hearing her teacher's praise, Yulia had other thoughts. Although she had powerful magic, compared to her teacher, she had no strength. With the complex logic of breaking curses, it seemed she preferred direct, violent combat more. Looking at the serious Giannino, she felt she might not be suitable to be a court archmage. Instead of sitting in an office researching curses, she wanted to be a damage-dealing machine, directly striking on the battlefield. The words she spoke were startling. She expressed her desire to join the guild and become a combat mage. Giannino jumped up from his chair, afraid this exceptional talent would be snatched away by someone else. He strongly encouraged Yulia to stay in the royal palace. But Yulia began to worry about marriage. She felt that her performance today was too strong. In the future, she would surely be seen as a tomboy. With such a ruined reputation, how could she find a partner? Giannino quickly comforted her, a mage of your caliber would be sought after by countless people. You might even have a chance for a royal marriage in the future. Who knew Yulia would despise it even more after hearing this? She just wanted to stay far away from those nobles and royals. She even thought desperately, I'd rather just close my eyes and pick someone to marry. Anyway, no one would like someone like me. Hearing this, Giannino paused, put down the teapot, and his tone suddenly became very serious. If you want to find someone to marry, why not consider me? Allow me to nominate myself. Who would have thought Teacher Giannino would take the initiative? It was Yulia's turn to be flustered. He not only explained his background clearly, but also honestly confessed that he was still single. Because he had tasted failure before. Back then, he was engrossed in studying magic and finally had a chance to show off. The result was that the girl found it boring, so he always held back. He wanted to find a life partner who truly understood magic. This hint was already very clear. Yulia's talent was truly astonishing. She successfully copied a magic spell after seeing it only once. This made her teacher praise her endlessly. But as he praised her, the conversation eventually steered in a completely different direction. He frankly expressed his desire to find a life partner like Yulia. Although Yulia used the age gap as a shield, but Giannino didn't care at all and even teased that she wasn't actually against it. Seeing Yulia's confusion, he spoke directly, not only inviting her to work with him in the future, but also promising to wait until she grew up. This time, Yulia was completely flustered. The pure teacher-student relationship, from this moment on, had probably changed completely. Teacher Giannino was serious this time. He officially requested to be added to the list of fiancé candidates. This surprise attack caught Yulia off guard. In her past life's memory, she had never interacted with this teacher, let alone expected him to have such a gentle side. Yulia didn't refuse right away, only saying that the engagement needed careful consideration. As soon as she got home, she realized her family hadn't received any news from the palace yet. But that was only temporary. Once they got a whiff of it, they would surely find a way to lock her up in the house. To avoid being bothered by her younger brothers, Yulia didn't even bother with dinner. After giving Ami some instructions, she planned to return to the academy immediately. Staying in this house for another second was another moment of suffocation. Only by escaping back to the dormitory could she temporarily. The news of the riot at the royal palace had begun to spread throughout the city. Even the main gate of the academy was under tight security. Yulia had a feeling this was the calm before the storm. She was too tired. As soon as she got back to the dorm, she collapsed onto the bed, not even bothering to change her clothes, and fell into a deep sleep. When a knock on the door woke her up, Yulia was still dazed, thinking she had only been napping for a moment. It turned out the dorm manager was already at the door. The teacher informed her that because her family couldn't contact her, a pile of letters had been sent, stuffing the dorm's mail slot. Looking at the thick stack of letters in her hand, Yulia's heart skipped a beat again. It seemed her dream of peace had vanished into thin air. Her family must be in chaos by now. The academy was currently deserted. After the incident at the tea party, the remaining students had all gone home, unintentionally creating a quiet space for Yulia. As she filled her hungry stomach in the cafeteria, she opened the thick stack of letters to read. A quick count showed that there were already 7 letters urging her to come home. The royal palace also sent a formal invitation, saying it was to thank her for saving their lives. Even Zolan and Dr. Baron sent letters asking about her condition. It seems her display of magical power in front of everyone that day had made it impossible for anyone to rest easy. Although these letters had different meanings, they all conveyed one message: she couldn't continue to hide in the academy, but had to go out and face the mess outside. Reading the letters, Yulia knew her family had received the news and was rushing to the palace to find out what was going on. But when she saw the date on the letter, she froze completely. This sleep. She had slept soundly for 3 whole days. No wonder the dorm manager's expression was so strange earlier. Anyone seeing a student in a coma for 3 days and 3 nights would probably be scared to death. What had happened outside in the past 3 days? Her mind was completely blank. Yulia quickly wrote a reply, deciding that she had to go home tomorrow no matter what to settle things once and for all. However, before that, she felt her body was still a bit weak and needed to go to the infirmary to check how much of her depleted magic power had recovered. Yulia pushed open the door. The doctor was somewhat surprised. It made sense. This girl had been sleeping for a long 3 days. She really needed a thorough checkup. Fortunately, she really needed a thorough checkup. Well, her body had no serious problems. It just needed more time to recover the depleted magic power. The doctor blurted out, "The day the royal palace was attacked, were you there?" Yulia nodded in acknowledgement, "No." Who knew the doctor would switch to flattery mode, praising her endlessly, saying that thanks to her shield, no one was injured that day. From then on, she became a hero in the eyes of the Night Order. Although she was praised, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. But as soon as she returned to the dormitory, the familiar fatigue hit her. It hit her like a wave. It seems this body still needed a lot of time to fully recover. The moment she stepped into the Count's residence, Yulia rushed to the 3rd floor. In the study, before she could even steady herself, her father threw a marriage proposal letter at her, then furiously asked what was going on. Perhaps because of her outstanding performance in the royal palace attack, Yulia had become a juicy piece of bait. So many people were eyeing her, wanting to marry her off immediately. Yulia was heartbroken. She quickly clarified, saying she had no desire to get married at all. In this life, she only wanted to pursue the truth of magic. She thought these words would calm her father down, but who knew he wouldn't listen? In his mind right now, he only cared about which families had sent these marriage proposals. Yulia had no choice but to make up the name of a court mage, hoping to get through it. Who knew her father would seriously consider the other party's status, feeling that this marriage was a good match. Today, it was Yulia's turn to be petrified. He really was her father. Just as she was about to find an excuse to slip away, her father saw through her. He made her change into a gorgeous formal dress before allowing her to go out and meet the royal family. The carriage swayed as it laboriously approached the royal palace gate. Crown Prince Randall's attendant, Dai, was already waiting there, relaying an invitation for her to meet at the first salon. That place was originally a gathering spot for the high nobility. Yulia knew that you can't avoid what's meant to be. What was coming would come eventually. She just didn't expect this meeting to happen so quickly. Through the heavy wooden door, Randall had been waiting there for some time. The first sentence, "Randall had been waiting there for some time," he uttered was not about official matters, but about his worry, urgently wanting to confirm if Yulia was injured anywhere, while also expressing his sincere gratitude for the shield that day. Although the relationship between the two was currently strange, this unexpected concern still left Yulia momentarily speechless. Randall was especially gentle today. He deliberately chose a quiet place, saying he wanted to sit down and enjoy tea with Yulia like this. After all, at the academy, the opportunities for them to talk were few and far between. Seeing Yulia eating cake, Randall suddenly praised her for being cute, even. He proactively offered to personally guide her in her magic training. This affection was truly a luxury that many longed for. However, Yulia felt like a warning bell was ringing in her head. She had a feeling Randall was secretly investigating her, so she quickly found an excuse to politely refuse, saying she was afraid of making the other young ladies jealous. The atmosphere suddenly dropped. Randall noticed her strange expression, but he didn't know that in Yulia's mind right now it was filled with images. The painful memories he caused couldn't be easily erased by just a few cups of sweet tea. Facing Randall, Yulia understood more than ever. Many things had changed in this life. She would absolutely not let herself be trapped in that suffocating golden cage again. No matter how gentle and thoughtful the current Randall was, she still wanted to live a life of her own, to control her own destiny. Suddenly, Randall put down his teacup and asked if Yulia had her eye on anyone from the marriage proposals. He even added a question, asking if she could consider adding him to the list of candidates. If her father heard this, he would probably jump for joy. But Yulia didn't hesitate for a second straight, up extinguishing all hope. She said her health was not good, she had no desire for marriage in this life, and even less intention of becoming empress. The concise and firm rejection left Randall stunned. To cut off the tail, Randall was stunned. To put an end to all of Randall's thoughts, Yulia deliberately mentioned Lady Vera. She said Lady Vera was the most prestigious choice for the position of crown princess, reminding him to be mindful of his status. But who knew Randall wouldn't care at all? He casually put down his teacup and coldly replied that it was just the other party's one-sided delusion, having nothing to do with him. Before Yulia could react, Randall suddenly became very serious, calling her name directly. Word by word, he firmly stated that the only fiancée he wanted was Yulia, and his heart would only be given to her.